Welcome back to the Trendcrusher podcast, everyone. I'm Peter K, aka Trendcrusher. Now, we've had a lot of music coming out. I can't believe how much music released in September already, and we're only 2 weeks in. And a great example of how great this month is right now as I record this, the latest Two Mold album has just dropped. Yeah, surprise, no PR, nothing. So I'm going to check it out after I finish recording this introduction. And for those of you who love thrash metal, well, I think you're going to dig this interview that I have. It's with the British thrash metal act Sylosis. So I had a chance to speak to Josh Middleton. And no, I didn't speak to him about Architects, but I spoke to him about Sylosis' latest album, which is titled A Sign of Things to Come. It's been out for a week or so, so if you haven't checked it out already, I'd suggest probably sample a track or two, maybe the singles, and then come listen to this interview because we talked a lot about the album, getting an outside producer for the first time, and much more. So here's my chat with Josh Middleton.
Hi, Josh. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's great to speak to you because, like I mentioned to you before we hit record, I actually had Connor Marshall on the podcast last year to talk about the Conjurer album, and that's when he kind of talked about Sylosis in there, and I can't believe it was a year ago. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's crazy that like now I've got like a second member of the band on the podcast, but like years apart.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So tell me about it because like we're currently talking about your upcoming album, A Sign of Things to Come, and I know we're still like a month or so, a little over a month away from it, and you're doing press around it. But this album's been a while coming, right? So tell me about it. How does it feel to be finally doing press and talking to people, having like 3 singles out from the album?
Oh, it's a big relief, yeah, because it's been a long time coming. We released the last record like a few weeks before the pandemic hit, so it was like I think it came out in February 2020, and we were hoping, we'd be touring and stuff back then, but the pandemic at least allowed us a lot of time to write this record and really refocus and try and really write the best album possible and like really try and think about what we were doing and try and write like a classic record. So it's been a long time coming, and it was finished about a year ago. So we've been sat on it for quite a while. So it's definitely been hard to wait, and it feels good to finally like have songs coming out and people to be reacting so well.
So basically, what you're saying is by the time I spoke to Connor, this album was already ready and he had to keep like tight lips about the album and not
Yep,
reveal too much in
exactly. Yeah,
there. So good job, Connor.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I want to pick on a couple of things that you said, right? I mean, you mentioned the word classic. And what you also have quoted in the press release, which I'm going to read back to you, says, my approach on this record was to rediscover what I loved about metal when I first discovered it. So, like, I mean, maybe we can do like a back and forth, but what was that like? Like, what are those initial albums that you kind of discovered when you loved metal, and how did that kind of tie back into A Sign of Things to Come?
I think for me, when I was getting into heavy music, as much as I liked, Metallica and some of the more classic metal stuff, it was in the new metal period, and there's not much new metal that I like or want to revisit, but Slipknot definitely had like a energy and excitement to them, especially as like a 12-year-old kid. Like it was so intense and heavy, and that's something that I just loved. And they were a big influence when the band started, when we first, because we started when we were 12, well before we ever released any music. And so bands like them and even like Pantera, they're like, especially Great Southern Trendkill, such a heavy, intense record. And that energy and excitement, especially as a fan, as a kid, was just like what really sucked me in and what really made me love this type of music. And I feel over the years, even though I'm really proud of all that music, as I got better as a guitarist and as a songwriter, I feel we lost some of that initial like extreme or like energy. Um, and it's not like I had to revisit those old records, like I hadn't listened to them for a long time, but I wanted to put myself in that mindset of like, I want to feel something from this type of music. I want to have like a excitement or a reaction physically. Like I want to like when I listen to like Suicide Note Part Two by Pantera, I literally want to like flip a table because it makes me like so energized, and that's something that I wanted to put back into our music that I felt had been lacking to a certain degree.
And I 100% agree. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I still remember the time where Slipknot were these guys, nine guys in the mask, and you try to figure out which one is scarier, and you knew them only by the numbers. And like, there was some mystery. I think there was that whole mystery and everything about it. And then when, like, I think for me personally, because I think we're in that same age bracket, right? Is that that was the heaviest thing you had ever heard at that time, right?
Yeah,
And this is again like early 2000s when I heard Slipknot and stuff like that for the first time. Uh, then I further went down the rabbit hole of death metal and all, which is a complete
same.
different thing. So I totally understand.
Yeah, I think that I was getting into death metal at the same time. I really liked, I was getting into like Cannibal Corpse and Morbid Angel. And I love those bands and they are very heavy. But with Slipknot, there's just an intensity, and I think it has a lot to do. Well, obviously their music and them as a band, but Ross Robinson, the producer who did all those new metal records, where he really got a lot out of the vocalist, and that kind of you could really feel the anger and stuff. So yeah, to me, even though Slipknot, they kind of get lumped in with new metal and they weren't technically a death metal band, in many ways they were like heavier because there was just a like intensity there that some death metal was a bit more like kind of stale and rigid.
So I have a day job, so I'm going to make a confession. Every so often when I have a really bad day, no surprises, but I just end up playing people equal shit. And I'm like, yes. And I'm suddenly like transported back to the teenager where I was like, yes, this is how I felt. So get that
Yeah,
like
yeah,
teenage angst and feeling. You know what I
definitely,
mean,
yeah,
right? Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but okay, there's so many different tangents to kind of go on from what you just said. So let's take the production one because I'm very curious about that, right? I mean, this is also an album where you actually got a co-producer, Scott Atkins. Why do that now, and what about A Sign of Things to Come made you kind of realize, or which portion did you realize that we need someone else on there? Because let's be honest, like you're someone who does this as a day job also, right? Like mixing and producing and stuff like that.
yeah. I mean, I think in the past I'd always had like a confidence in what we did, and I spent a lot of time writing the songs. I didn't really feel like I needed an external output. But I think one of the main things I took from being an architect was when I first joined and was writing for Holy Hell, giving songs to the band and then having Dan like rework them and like take the verse and make that the chorus and for example, and changing them around. And it was really uncomfortable for me when it's like I had a clear vision of what the song should be, and that's how I've always worked. And then someone's just kind of, you know, messed with it, for want of a better term. And I think that really helped me grow as an artist and like accepting outside feedback and just doing what's best for the song. And we'd worked with Scott Atkins in the past, but we had never really like seeked his opinion. So this time round, we sent him the demos months in advance, and he's really good at getting in the head of just your average metal fan and not a musician, but like what do people want to feel and see or hear from a band, like when they go to a show, what's going to resonate well. And as well as that, our manager is also credited with an executive producer credit because he was also really um, influential in terms of just like pushing us and pushing me as a vocalist and like saying like, you know, you need to make sure the vocals hit and they connect with people, and you're like there's a, you know, some emotion like in there that and really pushed the writing as well. He kind of said nothing bad about Cycle of Suffering, but just that we needed to do something way more memorable and anthemic, and like we needed to do our version of the Black Album. Like my favorite record by Metallica is And Justice for All. So it's not necessarily stylistic, but just in the Black Album, like every song could be a single or feel as anthemic, and that's kind of was our approach. Because even like, for example, People Equal Shit, it's not like a single. It's not going to be on the radio, but it's still like anthemic and catchy, and like you can sing along to it. So that's something that we just wanted more of as well.
Okay, and I'm glad you're saying that, right? Because when you're talking, all of these boxes are kind of ticked off when you look at your first single, which is Deadwood, which released 4 months ago, as of what we're speaking right now. And that was like the first taste of a sign of things to come. Why choose that as the single to kind of get this entire sound, what you're talking about, and showcase it? What about that?
To be honest, yeah, I was kind of, yeah, I wasn't sure. I think the label and management really liked that song coming out first, which is great because that's like one of the heavier tracks, and I love it when the label and the management want the heavy stuff as well, because that's me. I love super heavy music. Yeah, it just felt like a really, you know, solid statement. The reason that one came out a bit early is because we had this show with Lamb of God at Wembley Arena in London back in March. So we kind of released that one to have something new to, you know, to play live and to draw some attention to the band, because we've been quiet for a while. But we didn't announce the album campaign at the time. And then Poison for the Lost again is another like really heavy one, and I was really glad that those were the first two to come out and just like show everyone that there's a new kind of energy injected into the band. And they've gone down really well. Like I'm blown away by the response.
Okay, so for those of you listening and haven't heard Deadwood as yet, well, here it is on the podcast.
Understood, we remove the dead wood.
And that was Deadwood by Sylosis. And I've got Josh Middleton with me. Now, I want to kind of talk a bit about just the entire thing that you said, right? Like there's a new energy in there. I've read somewhere, I can't remember whether it was press or some other interviews, but literally this feels like a new Sylosis. Would you agree to there? And if you I mean, I know it sounds great, and like I know you want to avoid the cliches of every band that this is our heaviest, this is our best album. But what would you say would be some of the things that people may notice or may not notice about the band?
Yeah, I do feel like this almost feels like a debut album again, and I have said that already because it's funnily enough, like this album is kind of almost exactly what we would have written when we first started if we had had the knowledge or like actually knew what we were doing. Because when we were 12 years old, we couldn't really, it's hard to like write what you want the band to sound like. You're kind of limited in your knowledge. And a lot of people, well, barely anyone knows what we sounded like when we started because we didn't release music until 2005, but we'd been a band since 2000 or 2001. So it a lot of people might hear this as a new thing, and admittedly, like the album does feel modern. It's not like a throwback record, but it's actually like the closest thing we've done to how we would have sounded or how we did sound when we were kids. And like a lot of that kind of energetic and like pissed off kind of Pantera thing that we were listening to at the time, and the more extreme stuff. And when we were kids, we just wanted to be the heaviest, ugliest band, and we wanted that like primal energy to come out, and that's in the music a bit more now. But I do think the album's still quite varied, and you know that we've done a lot of like very like epic, emotional, melodic, and kind of stuff in the past, and we're doing other stuff on this record, but it doesn't mean we're gonna like leave that behind. That's still always part of what we do, and like it still comes up in songs like Godless Throne or Absent. But yeah, we just wanted to kind of branch out and do different things and stuff that we'd been afraid to do in the past, and just the main thing though is just yeah trying to push to create like a classic album, like really think about every song as if it could be a single, or like just make every song feel anthemic even if it's super heavy, like want it to feel like it counts and it's not just another song.
Okay. Now, I have to bring this up, right? Because I also mentioned to you before we hit record that I'm based out of India. And you corrected me because I thought it was only one trip, but you made two trips to India in successive years. I know it's been a while, and I know it may make you feel even older, but what were your memories of your trip to India? I'm curious.
Oh, I remember it really well. Yeah, it was great. We were only there like 3 days at a time pretty much. um I loved it. Yeah, I loved it as a country. Indian food's my favorite, so that helps. And the reaction was insane. I think the there probably weren't that many people there that knew who we were, but like in the crowd, but the response was insane. Like it was as if we were the Beatles. Like our other guitarist Bailey like got in the crowd and people were like ripping his t-shirt off him like as if he was like a huge celebrity and stuff. It was a really special experience for us. Very humbling, and people were really kind, and I love it. Yeah, so I can't say we have any plans to come back, but I would love it if we did. So if we get any offers, I'm gonna say yes straight away.
Yeah, I mean, like Indian food is the added bonus to playing live in India, right?
Yeah,
Why not?
exactly.
But I did notice that actually you've got a European tour with Malevolence, and this is actually a band that Connor and I also talked about because the only way I could describe that album was like just punches after punches because that's a relentless album that they put out. But other
Yeah.
than that, could you talk about that tour and anything else you've got planned?
Yeah, so very excited for that tour. Malevolence are doing really well at the moment. So we're really happy to be touring with them, and we share a manager as well, so it makes it easy to figure these things out. Um, yeah, it's been a lot. We haven't toured since 2016. We played some shows, but not like consecutive tours. So it'll be good to finally get in the swing of things again, and try and put some of this more of this energy back into our live shows as well. And other than that, it's looking like we might be heading to Australia at the start of next year if everything goes to plan, and just as much touring as we can do.
Wow, that's awesome. I think like Australia has suddenly become one of those places. I mean, um a month or so ago, I caught Vader, and they were on their way back from Australia, and they done an entire tour. So I like that Australia is becoming a spot, and some bands are kind of like on the way back from Europe or North America, kind of stopping in India. So yeah, I hope that happens. If whoever's listening,
Yeah,
send this to your management, I guess.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, Australia seems to be like really taking off. So yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about another aspect, right? And especially since you are into production, and I'm sure, I mean, does it leave you for much time to kind of discover new music? Do you get time to check out like new bands? I mean, other than like say like Malevolence, who also share management with you.
Yeah, I do have plenty of time to check out new music. If I'm honest, I think I definitely don't want to say that there's any problems with the scene. I think there's a lot of great new bands out there, and the scene's doing really well. But there's not a lot of music out there that is like really catered to me and my tastes. So like
Okay.
I really want like tons of riffs, like awesome guitar riffs, and like super heavy but like metallic sounding. And and for me, there's not really anyone filling that like Pantera like metal band slot. Like the more like metal. So like Machine Head, Lamb of God, Pantera. In terms of like modern bands, like there's a lot of like death metal coming out, which is great and I love. Or there's more like interesting new styles of metal, which is also amazing. But there's like not much in that kind of lane that I really like. But Malevolence are great. They're like they tick those boxes for me. Same with Bleed From Within. Our drummers in them. It's kind of cool that
Oh yeah.
you've got
The
Sylosis, Bleed From Within, and Malevolence all from the UK. Kind of leading the charge with that kind of thing. I think. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, if I have to be very direct then, and you can take a minute or two if you want, what's on your Spotify playlist at the moment?
Um. I've been listening to the new Evil record. And I'm friends
Okay, yeah.
with the guy that mixed and produced the record, Chris Clancy, who works with Colin Richardson, and it's like a really satisfying production as well. Like the tones, it sounds really good. But the songs are great too. Um, I like a band called Judiciary, who are really good from America. They're sort of like a hardcore band that's just kind of gone metal, and it's really good as well. Um, so yeah, those are two like new releases. There's a band called Fugitive, which is ex-member from Power Trip.
Oh yeah,
I really like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
actually, the drummer for Creeping Death is also the drummer for Fugitive. Totally didn't
oh cool.
realize until I spoke to him.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah, so
cool. Yeah, I didn't know that.
there's that entire scene happening in the States also.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
must say, right? I mean, like that's one of the things. I mean, I'm sure you remember that entire retro thrash wave that happened in like the mid 2000s. I know there were like
yeah,
some boutique labels, and then like labels like Earache and everyone else also picked it up, if I remember well. So
yeah.
I'm glad like that's not the sound that you guys kind of ended up going for when you're looking at the album. But I have to ask you, right? And before I kind of wrap up with the courtesy, how do people keep in touch and stuff like that? And this is a question which is a little more introspective. Is you started your first lineup, as you said, of the band when you all were 12. Uh, I'm guessing that was like in the 2000s or so, while you were
Yeah,
still in high school.
yeah.
And 23 years later, now you're putting together your sixth album, on the cusp of releasing your sixth album. What do you know now that you wish you knew back then?
Um, I don't know. I guess like it would have been handy if I'd just been the singer from the start and had been doing that. That would have made my life easier. And yeah, I mean, just the knowledge of like how to write better songs. That's the main thing I wish I would have had then, and we could have had a head start and been a better band from a very early age. But I don't really regret anything or anything like that. I think I'm proud of our history.
Yeah, and that's cool. I mean, like I was hoping there was no like things you'd want to go redo completely.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot. And I think like that's one of the things about like growing older, right? Like you sometimes are looking back with regrets, but sometimes you also become kinder to yourself because you realize that you had to go down that path, or you had to go down a certain way to kind of learn and be the person you are today, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. So, thanks so much, Josh. Totally appreciate it. We're going to leave the links to the album and everything in the show notes. And definitely the album's out on the 8th of September. So, if you haven't already pre-order, I don't know, are you doing any special merch or anything cool that you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
we have a lot of we have a lot of pre-orders, and I think there's a limited amount of exclusive vinyl and pre-order merch and stuff. So yeah, we do have all that on our web store.
Awesome. So, I'm going to leave the links to all of that in the show notes. But thanks so much, Josh. All the best. And yeah, hope to see you sometime live soon.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me. Take care.
And that was Josh Middleton of Sylosis. You know, I realized at some point that we were around the same age, so very similar influences, very similar experiences with bands like Slipknot and others. And I'm really glad that Sylosis have decided to kind of, stick to that sound, which is just pure and raw, but also anthemic at the same time, right? If you haven't already, do check out the album. It's titled A Sign of Things to Come. It's out right now via Nuclear Blast Records, so I'm going to leave link in the show notes. But before I sign off, you know the drill. Hit subscribe on the platform you're listening to. Follow me on Instagram or X. Anyone still use that platform? Well, just search for Trendcrusher and I'm right there wherever you kind of look up on the internet, right? If you're looking for me, just search for Trendcrusher. But that's all for this episode. Last thing, we're going to be in a break for a couple of weeks since I'm traveling. Check my Instagram for updates on my travel. I am planning on catching a show in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. But I'll see you all next month. Cheers.